Hi, everybody. I am Kara Baskin of the Boston Globe, and I am here with my pal Irene Lee, who is the owner of May Boston, which is a food truck and an excellent restaurant in Boston. And she has so kindly agreed to chat a little bit about the state of the restaurant industry in Boston, small businesses in Boston, and also you guys can submit questions if you just toggle to the bottom of your screen. There's a little Q&A button. So after Irene and I chat a little bit, we welcome you to submit your questions and we'll take as many of them as we can. So thank you, Irene, for joining us. It's so great to see you. I was going to say in real life, but in virtual life.
This is about as close to real life as we're going to get for a while.
Yes. Yeah. So it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for your time. And on that note, can you give us a snapshot of what is going on in this virtual reality right now for you in terms of your business? How are you guys doing? And what is your take on the temperature of the Boston restaurant industry as a whole now that we're roughly 6 weeks into the pandemic?
So yeah, wow. What a crazy time. May right now is doing okay. The first thing we did when we had to shut down was we moved everyone to remote work. And so we kind of became like a baby tech startup overnight. So we're on Trello, we're doing Zoom stand-ups, we're doing sprints and trying to like work on the business, even though we can't physically be there. So that's been really amazing to have the staff like working in this different capacity on improving the business. And then right now we're open for takeout, limited hours, limited days of the week. And we're really trying to promote like bulk sales. So people stocking up so that they don't have to go out as much rather than just saying like, oh, maybe I'll drop by for a sandwich. It allows us to plan a lot more effectively. And then hopefully people can make fewer trips outside. We have dabbled in grocery sales and we still have toilet paper in inventory, which we are providing. Every couple days we get one order that's just like for a lot of toilet paper. And so every time that happens, we're like, okay, yes, we're so glad we're here for our community. And then in addition to that, we've been doing work with Off Their Plate, which is providing donor funded meals to frontline hospital workers. And so that actually is revenue for us, which is amazing. And so we've served, I think, about 1,200 meals to different hospitals in the Boston area. And in the meanwhile, we are just trying to figure out how to get people back into the restaurant, our staff, that is, how to do it safely, and also just making sure that everyone is taken care of financially. A lot of our staff have qualified for unemployment, even though they're still working a couple of hours for us, which is really great. And so we have been reaching out to everyone individually and just getting a sense of like how they're doing, if they have any health issues they want us to know about, if they need loans, if they need other financial assistance, and just trying to take as individualized an approach as possible.
On that note, so how are you making money? I mean, to be candid, right? So have you applied for loans? Have you gotten any assistance from the state or from the federal government? How does that work? I think a lot of people are mystified as to how restaurants can even pull off takeout or groceries right now. So can you speak to that a little bit financially?
Definitely. So we applied for the Payroll Protection Program loan, and we did not get in time before the money ran out. So we're hoping there will be more money, and then maybe we'll have some access to that. But for the moment, we really are focusing on just selling as much food as we reasonably can. And the Off Their Plate work has been a huge portion of our revenue. And in a sense, it's kind of like catering, right? Because we have a set menu and we know exactly how much we need to make. And typically the margin on something like that is better than just regular restaurant service. And so that's been really helpful for us. We also recently launched our virtual dumpling classes, which take place over a Zoom such as this. And you can prep your own ingredients at home, or you can swing by the restaurant to pick up a kit. And so our incredible team has been leading people all over the world in like collectively making and folding and frying dumplings together. And so that has also been a little bit of extra revenue. Our guests have been incredible about buying gift cards and dumpling class tickets for when they can actually come into the restaurant to take a dumpling class. So we do have kind of a trickle of revenue coming in. It is a fraction of what we would normally be doing, especially because catering is usually about a third of our overall revenue. And obviously people are not gathering in large groups and eating our food right now.
Right. Are there any other relief programs in the works? Has the city worked with you at all? And have your landlords, not sure what your arrangement is with the building that you're in, but have you seen any bright spots there, any possibilities on the horizon?
So we have applied for a bunch of different things through the city, through the state, private grants, and so far we haven't gotten anything. We have a real estate deal in the works for what we're hoping might be Meme 2.0, which means that we actually already had a lot of like irons in the fire with banks, and that kind of complicated the whole aid
I was
application.
going to say, what's the holdup? Yeah.
Yeah, and so we are already asking a bunch of banks for money right now. And so,
Yeah.
resubmitting or submitting other paperwork, there's a lot going on. And so for us, we have really tried to focus on, can we sustain ourselves without any huge infusion of aid right now? We have to be prepared to do that. And our landlord has deferred rent for us, which is great. I think we are going to probably keep pushing to see how we can do with that. And then we did hit up like every single vendor and say, hey, is there anything you can do for us? And we are, trying our best to stay on top of all of our bills. Our farmers are getting paid first, and then our local food hubs. And then, some folks are going to have to probably wait a little bit longer to hear from us. But everyone we've talked to has been incredibly understanding, really generous. And it, what Ayanna Pressley always says is like, my heart breaks and fills over and over again. And I think we all are seeing that, like the swells of generosity that are coming out, and then in the opposite direction, just like the crushing reality of everything. And so the restaurant industry is totally seeing that right now. Like our guests are so amazing. They send us these incredible notes. Like we feel so supported. And at the same time, it's just still really scary. We don't know what's going to happen. And the farther out ahead we look, like the more uncertain it feels. So my therapist and I talk a lot about that.
Ambiguity, being comfortable with ambiguity is so important right now. And sort of on that note, in terms of trying to find new ways of drumming up revenue while also helping people at the same time, groceries is something that you've been working with. And so you had tried to sell groceries. I know you're selling paper products. You were also selling actual food products, and you ran into some snags with that with the city. Can you talk about where you're at?
Yeah, so where we're at is that we're still not selling food groceries, and the city essentially told us that we didn't have the right permit, and we have heard that they may be releasing new guidelines that will allow us to sell things that are packaged a certain way, and so we are eagerly awaiting an update from them. At the same time, I think we are trying to focus on our other opportunities. For me, the grocery program was more about offering a service than it was about generating revenue. Like Meme is never going to do the volume that like
it's not going to be Market Basket, right?
So I think for me, like I have spoken to a couple journalists about this. I drive by Trader Joe's on my way to the restaurant every day, and there's always a crazy line. It actually like goes all the way down to the post office, and then the line out of the post office like crosses with it, and then it's like, oh my God, how are you all going to stay 6 feet apart? Right. And so, for me, just the thought that people have to go to a grocery store and pay retail prices and endanger, potentially themselves and grocery store workers who we know are getting sick at a very disturbing rate. If we can relieve that pressure at all, like that would feel really great. And because of what I have access to, I haven't been going to the grocery stores, and I feel really privileged, to be able to do that. And so we're hoping that there'll be more news. There are definitely other folks in the city who are selling groceries. And if the health department hasn't gotten to them, then, we cheer them on. And so we think that, if whatever we were doing kind of raised people's attention, then hopefully we'll get more news soon.
I want to go back to something that you said, and you were joking, but it's actually really true, how you're talking to your therapist about this and stuff. Just mentally, what is it like to be in this when somebody has invested? I mean, you're a small business. You've invested a dream in this. This isn't some faceless big company that you're a cog in the wheel. This is your baby. How does that feel for you to see it morph and change? How do you manage those emotions while still trying to keep a business alive?
Managing emotions? Is that what we're talking about? I
We talk about managing, but so, as a small business owner, this is so close to your heart. What is it like for you? Do you feel like your business is in danger? Do you feel worried? Are you optimistic? What's your mindset right now?
yeah, I
Sorry
mean,
to get deep.
yeah, I've heard of managing emotions. I don't know if I've but yeah, I think that, it's tons of different emotions. And
Yeah,
I think what I struggle with a lot is that there are like immediate, near term things that need to get done and need to get
sure.
figured out. And we also need to be thinking about the long term, which is complex in its own ways. And so there's kind of this like whiplash that I feel like I get from thinking about like, okay, today I have to like cook this thing and package it. And then, in 6 months, I have to write new SOPs for like how to keep people safe in the restaurant. And so trying to ground myself in between that, like in that big timeline, that's definitely challenging. And I would say that even in the midst of like all the uncertainty, Maymay is really lucky because we have like some safety nets financially. We have a line of credit with the bank. We have really flexible debt. And so I think relative to a lot of small businesses and especially restaurants, like I feel like we are in a very safe position, relatively speaking. And so I have really tried to focus on like what we can do for our community, and what we can do to support other restaurants, to keep educating diners. And I think that's helping me to sort of stay, again, like grounded in the midst of all of this, is remembering that like, even if Maymay doesn't exist after this or in 10 years, like I still want Boston to have an incredibly vibrant, dynamic restaurant community. And so in a way, we all want to be working towards that. It is about individual businesses, but only to a point, I think.
Yeah. And, you mentioned, looking the day to day, but then looking 6 months out, looking a year out. What do you think the future holds? I know it's so hard to say because we're still so soon into this pandemic, but if you had to come up with a hypothesis of what's going to happen in maybe a year, we wake up a year from now, where's the industry going to be at? Where are you going to be at? What do you think, what trends might take hold? I was interviewing somebody else, Ted Kilpatrick at Chickadee, and he was saying, we're either going to have to maybe do takeout or really go fine dining. It's going to be one or the other, but the fast casual or mid-price casual might be in danger. What's your sense? What do you think might we be looking at in a year?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'll say, just because of the way you phrase that, if we're all waking up a year from now, we will all be so lucky because there are so many people who do not have their health at this time. And so again, like I always come back to that at a baseline is like, I'm healthy. The people I love are healthy. Like, thank goodness, if nothing else, we have that. As far as what restaurants are going to look like, I do think that everything will change. Many of us, I think, will be doing a lot more takeout than we have in the past. And I think that we'll start to see menus kind of transitioning to accommodate for that. So food that travels better, food that does better in bulk, like similar to the items that we've been doing. I'm hoping that we will see the landscape of third-party delivery apps really change. So Caviar, Uber Eats, Grubhub, these companies take a really big cut from restaurants that they work with. And I think that we are increasingly having diners who understand that and are kind of asking questions about it. And I'm hoping that, something will happen. Maybe more restaurants will start having their own delivery, even if that wasn't previously like a big part of their revenue. Maybe we'll have more restaurants that do, contactless curbside. Maybe there'll even be fine dining restaurants doing that. Like, can you imagine like pulling up to Grill 23 and getting your like truffled tater tots like in your trunk? I don't know. I mean,
Hearing like a tuxedoed waiter greeting you at your car.
You know, tip really well. And I think that, I am also hoping that we will figure out the big question of staffing, which has always been a challenge in this industry. A lot of people who work in restaurants, if they're getting $600 a week from unemployment, that's probably pretty competitive with what they're getting paid to work in a restaurant. And so I think that we have a big challenge ahead of us, which is the same as it always was, but more urgent, which is like, how do we make this a real job that is sustainable for people, that feels safe and secure and has some meaning for them. And that is, something that at Maymay we've always really focused on, and tried to think about how we reduce turnover and what the employee experience really is. But I think that hopefully we're all going to be paying a lot more attention to that.
In that vein, are there any silver linings, anything that we can take from this experience and learn from it going forward that might make you a better business owner, a more thoughtful business owner? Any ways this has shaped you in a good way?
I think that right now I feel more loyal to my staff than I ever have. And I think, I've always felt that I was a very loyal and loving business owner and employer. But I think right now, they are keeping me going in ways that are very kind of hard to put words to be motivated by the fact that there are 25 young people who really love this business and want to come back and want to be at work doing what they're really good at. That is incredibly motivating for me. I'm also really happy that there's a lot more talk among diners about the economics of the restaurant industry, about the importance of spending with small businesses instead of going to, Ruth's Chris with their multi-million-dollar PPP grant. And so I'm hoping that, we'll keep being really conscientious about that. And I think right now I love seeing people take pride in how they are voting with their dollar, posting to Instagram about I got takeout from this great neighborhood spot, and hopefully inspiring other people to do the same. That kind of pride, I think we don't necessarily see consumers always exhibiting. And I really appreciate that. And then this is going to take kind of a dark turn, but it's probably worth saying, we have advisors who have always said to us, we're headed for a downturn, and if you are smart and you save your money, there will probably be a lot of empty restaurants that you can, pick the dead carcasses of. And I think that there are some who would argue that the industry is very saturated, or it was, a month ago. And so there is definitely some thinning out that is going to happen. And that might be an opportunity for other businesses to expand. And hopefully, that continues to add rather than detract from our restaurant community. So obviously, I would much prefer that every restaurant that currently exists when this is over. But I think when we do kind of put on our heartless economist hats on, we do have to say that is something that's going to come out of this. And I think that, hopefully that pushes us forward and not back.
There's some culinary Darwinism, perhaps.
Yeah.
You've been doing a lot of work with Unsung Restaurants, and I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that. Those mom and pop restaurants that don't maybe have the social media presence, they don't have the Instagram presence, they don't have the big money or the reputation to sustain themselves. So can you talk about what you've been doing to help them?
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, we started a campaign on GoFundMe, and it's called Unsung Restaurants, with the thought that there are many restaurants that we rely on, for that quick afternoon bowl of pho or that late night chicken wing. And those are kind of the unsung heroes of our industry because they don't have PR firms, they don't have 10,000 followers on Instagram. And so those are kind of our heroes. And I think especially for people who work in the restaurant industry, they might work at, again, I'll bring up Grill 23, but they probably love eating that banh mi on .av or something like that. And so I'm really hoping that these immigrant-owned kind of, some of them sort of hole-in-the-wall mom and pop restaurants, that they come out of this. I've been very moved by how diners are donating to different businesses, to their employee relief funds. But the thought that these big restaurant groups with investors are asking for and collecting money from the public really prompts you to ask, who's going to take care of that spot around the corner? They don't have Instagram. They don't have PR. For example, the Busy Bee Cafe is right around the corner. I've been eating at the Busy Bee since I was a kid, and, cash only, no website, no social media presence. And what are they going to do? I don't know. I can't get in touch with them. But we've had people donate and say hey, can you make sure this gets to the owner of the Busy Bee? I think his name is Chris Christakis. And I guess I'm going to stuff cash in an envelope and just put it under the door. But Anyway, the whole idea with Unsung Restaurants is that folks can earmark their donation for any spot that they really love, that they feel like maybe isn't getting the attention that it could use right now. And we've said, okay, like, my name's Irene and you can find me at this restaurant, and I will make sure that your money goes to the place that you want it to go to. And so far we've raised about $9,300, and we've distributed almost $3,000 of that. We're still struggling to get in touch with a lot of the restaurants that people are looking for, but we are definitely sending out a lot of like Venmo payments and PayPal, and it's very inspiring to see people say like, hey, there's like a language barrier here, or like,
Yeah.
no, like they don't even have a phone, but like, I love this place and I rely on it, and I want to make sure that I can help them out. And even if these restaurants aren't able to reopen, if it helps them pay a bill, or, you know, support an employee, that still really, I think, is worth something. And so I said this to you earlier, like, I'm of two minds, which is like, okay, $10,000 is like not a lot of money to raise in the grand scheme of things, but if I can Venmo $200 to a bunch of people, like, that's money they didn't have yesterday. And so the idea that we would love for our community to come together in this bigger, sort of more collective way to really think about, like, who do I rely on, who like fills me with joy on a regular basis, and who's not getting written about, or not getting profiled, or not getting, I don't know, purchasing ads on Instagram, things like that. So yeah, that's been a really fun project. And again, also something that's helping me feel like, okay, like, I'm not totally helpless. I can do something, I can contribute.
Mm-hmm. And that's so important. Like you said, I mean, that's $200 they didn't have yesterday, and every little bit helps. So on that note, I would like to turn it over. We have so many Q&A, great questions. So I'm going to turn it over, and again, remind you that at the bottom of your screen, you can write in with a question if you like on the Q&A button. But the first question that I think is really interesting, and in terms of sort of operating a restaurant from that purely operational standpoint, is there anything that you're going to do different as a business owner when your restaurant does, God willing, reopen again? What is that going to look like? What do you think you're going to make adjustments to personally at May?
That's such a great question. I think that we are going to have to be really conservative with staffing, assuming that we are not doing the volume of catering that we normally would do. We're about to head into what would have been wedding season, which is a huge part of our revenue. And most of those weddings are postponing till much later in the year or even next year. So I think you'll see fewer people on our side of the restaurant. And then I think that we really need to be optimizing for takeout. That is something that we have maybe kind of like pushed against in the past, because like food that looks beautiful on a plate like does not look great in a box. And on some level, I think we've kind of said like, well, this isn't takeout food. And so, you know, sure, you can order it for takeout, but it's going to be better if you eat it here. And I think at this point, like, we can't be picky about that. Like, that is a very kind of absurd line to draw at this point. Yeah. But also, you know, we were selling SOM kits, like pork belly lettuce wrap kits. And like, that was sort of a family style thing. And like, yes, it comes in an aluminum tray, but like, yeah, it looks really good. Like, you get all these little things of sauce and pickles, and so thinking about like where we can excel in that bigger format and in that sort of takeout delivery format, I think that to me seems like the number one thing.
And in the same vein, I think this is a really good question, especially on the note of the unsung restaurants who might not be able to do this. Maybe you can give some tips to people who are struggling. What are you going to do differently to market, or, you know, how can restaurants maybe better market their business and reach more people because of how they're impacted right now? How do you get the word out? How do you get the word out about what you're offering? How do you reach your customers? What are some ways that you can sort of drum up that loyalty and that affinity during a time when people are at home and a little bit disconnected?
Definitely. I mean, I think social media is huge. And right now, like, that's the way that we can reach a lot of guests who otherwise we would not have any contact with, right? So if you do have a newsletter, if you do have Instagram, being as militant as possible with posting every day or sending it out once a week. Deborah Hansen, who's the chef at Taberna de Haro, which is across Beacon Street from Meme,
yeah,
she's telling me every day about getting a tortilla de española. And I'm like, Deborah, you are killing it. Like, this is awesome, you know? And so what that's showing me is not only that like she would love to sell me some food, which of course, but also that like she's there, she's hustling, she cares about this business, she is on the front line of it. And, you know, she's thinking about how to provide for people in this very challenging time. I think that regardless of whether it's on social media or through other means, this is a time where businesses are really getting to show people who they are, whether that is like how they care for their staff or don't, how they contribute for their community or don't. And I think that really communicating those values and those actions that carry the values, that's really important. And I think, you know, previously we may have lived in a space where people might prefer their local business owner not to talk about politics or, you know, not to talk about social issues. And this seems like a really good time to do that. As much as that can be scary. Yeah. And so I'm hoping that, you know, people who may not have spoken out as much previously might be able to do that. And I think that this is a time where that is going to garner a lot more loyalty than it will detractors.
Somebody just wrote in, and this is an interesting question that that hadn't occurred to me, but is really important to revenue. I'm interested to know about your beverage program, and if you have been able to pivot your beverage program to accompany takeout and delivery. Has the state or the city loosened beverage laws to accommodate you?
All right, so we are located in the city of Boston, and we have been permitted to add beer and wine to takeout. And so we have been selling a fair amount of wine and beer, which has been really great. As a sort of fast casual restaurant where like you order at the counter and we call your name, we never had a huge beverage program, but at this point, we are thinking about like, should we be expanding that? Like we have a whole dining room that is basically storage space. And should we kind of try to spice up like our wine and beer options, reach out to more craft companies, more, you know, mom and pop companies, again, that we really want to be supporting, and kind of diversify our menu. So that's something that we're just starting to think about. We are so amazed that the city got it together to allow for this. And so I think that we're just kind of like figuring that out and accepting it as reality. And I am definitely hoping that that's something we'll continue to be able to do. I know that it's complex with, you know, liquor stores, retail liquor stores, and how all of that works. But it definitely is like a huge opportunity that we never had before.
And, you know, one thing that people think about, you know, in terms of taking out food, not just beverages, obviously, but actual food as well, is safety and cleanliness. And that is on a lot of people's minds. And I'm listening to you talk like, oh, it would be so great to go pick up some beer and dumplings at May, or, you know, go to my favorite pizza place and get some pizza. And I have heard from lots of people, and here's a question now. Could you talk a little bit about how restaurants adhere to safety standards? And, you know, good restaurants were always on point with this. This isn't anything new. But can you maybe provide some reassurance for folks or some guidance for folks about communicating that? Because I think that that's something that is holding some customers back because they're simply reluctant to know, you know, who's touched their food? Is this okay? How does this work behind the scenes? So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that diners should push for whatever safety measures make them feel okay going out and getting takeout. So if that's asking for contactless delivery or curbside pickup, or, hey, can you put this in my trunk so that I don't have to get out of the car? Like, please ask us for that. We would love to make sure we are doing everything that we can so that you feel safe and cared for, even though you're not coming into the restaurant. Like, hospitality is still our job. And so attending to your needs as a diner is still like paramount for us. Something else I'll say is that I think restaurant workers have always been really good at washing our hands, probably a lot better than the general public. And so I think that, you know, I'm hopeful that folks have a sense that we are always thinking about hygiene because it's part of our job. And in addition to that, a lot of restaurants are taking additional measures, you know, masks, gloves, sanitizing surfaces, even more frequently than is required. changing out sanitizing liquid even more frequently than is required, wiping down takeout containers before we put them in a bag for the guests. And I'll just share one anecdote that we have a longtime regular who actually started eating at May when we were the food truck in 2012, and she had a baby during the first week of the stay-at-home order. So what a terrifying, challenging situation to be. But she basically called and said, like, hey, this is my situation. I'm really, really scared. I trust you guys. And like, you are the only place we are coming to. You are the only place we are driving our car to. And can you just tell me about what you're doing and like how you can sort of make sure that we're really safe right now? And essentially she said, like, I trust you completely. Can you just please confirm that that is the right judgment for me? And so she actually has come back. Her husband drops by once a week. They get tons of stuff. We always throw in a little extra something for them. And, you know, that was, I cried like a baby the first time we did that, because I just felt like, oh my God, can you imagine how scary and how much you have to trust other people to take care of you in this really complicated time. Yeah. And so a situation like that, like, we would always love to hear directly from someone who wants to know how we're keeping them safe.
This is kind of a fun question for those who are still a little bit reluctant about going out, venturing out, or maybe who are balancing going out with cooking for themselves safely for the first time. Irene, do you have any candid, easy advice for ways to put decent meals together at home? So going on a detour a little bit, but I think something that's on a lot of people's minds. Ask the expert. What do you do at home? Any tips from inside your own kitchen?
Sure. I mean, so I started out as a home cook. I didn't go to culinary school. I went to the University of Food Network for my culinary education. I would say use Google. If you don't know, ask the internet. That's always a great starting point. And I also think that like simple is usually better. And if it's easier and feels more attainable, then that's great too. Like broccoli is one of my favorite vegetables, and I love to do like shaved broccoli salad and like charred broccoli with like little crispy things on top. But like most of the nights that I'm cooking broccoli in my kitchen, it's just in a pan with like the right amount of salt and pepper. Seasoning food also, I think, is something that a lot of home cooks maybe don't think about the way that restaurant cooks do. So with the advent of salt, fat, acid, heat, I think a lot of people, which is that incredible cookbook and Netflix show, a lot of people are thinking about balance in their food. So making sure that you have like a squeeze of lemon and like a hint of chili pepper to really kind of amp up the food. And unless you're watching your salt intake, for health reasons, the way that we train people to season their food at May is add salt until it tastes so good that you don't want to stop eating it. And that's when you've added the right amount of salt. And so, I am definitely the cook who like slips an extra stick of butter or an extra pinch of salt into something when, my family's not looking. But kind of just dialing that up a little bit, not going necessarily to the extreme, that can really, I think, take a lot of home cooking to a level that makes it feel really like addictive and empowering.
How are your dumpling classes going as a cooking teacher? What can you say about that?
They are so fun. And one thing I'll say is I don't actually teach the virtual dumpling classes anymore because we have all these folks on the staff who like love doing it and are really great at it. And it's an opportunity for us to pay them more and kind of train them into this different role. But they have such a great time, and like seeing everybody's pictures and watching the videos on Zoom is super inspiring. And I think dumplings are one of those foods that is kind of like, it feels a little mystical in some way. But the truth is, like, it's easy. You just wrap stuff in stuff and then you fry it. And so we're always all about encouraging people to cook at home more, because I think it just increases your appreciation for food, whether it's stuff you cooked or stuff you get in a restaurant. And so witnessing the magic of somebody figuring out how to fold and cook a dumpling themselves, it's so sweet. And so recently we reached out to all of our wedding clients who are booked for this year, who are probably, either they have or they will have to make other arrangements. And we said like, hey, do you all want to come to just like a free dumpling class? And like, we can all sit and like talk shop, and like, you can complain about like how awful this is. And like, we'll just hang out, and at the end you'll have dumplings to eat. So we are holding that class on Saturday night. That's something I'm really looking forward to, connecting those people, and also just, taking a moment to say like, hey, this really sucks. And let's do something to honor how brutal this is.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody else just wrote in, are you going to do this maybe on social media as well? Do you think you might pivot to doing the classes there?
That's a great question. I don't know. I am so not in charge of this part of the
Never
saying, but I will make sure that we're talking.
That's an idea for you. Absolutely. Somebody else is writing in right now and asking, and this is a really good thought. So in a kitchen, they're saying that in their kitchen it's small, right? And they're having a hard time with social distancing. It's hard to keep everyone healthy. Do you have any ideas there?
Yeah, I mean, assuming we're talking about a restaurant kitchen, bringing their staff in, we typically don't have more than 3 people in the restaurant at a time. And so we are relying on a very small number of people to get everything done. So that's part of why we're doing this bulk takeout that allows us to kind of batch food more effectively. We also have like a really limited menu. So I know that there are a lot of guests who are saying like, where's this thing? Where's that thing? And we're saying like, maybe we'll rotate it on next week, but we're keeping it like really, streamlined right now.
Yeah.
And one of the fun parts of this is that like I'm in the kitchen every day, and that hasn't really been the case since like 2013. So we're kind of like in startup mode, but there also is this level of, it's just got to get done with fewer people. Or we stagger the shifts so that somebody works in the morning and then someone else comes in the afternoon. But I think that, you can't necessarily be too conservative when it comes to making sure that your staff not only are safe, but feel safe in the kitchen. Right. And so a big part of what we do is just like, we're always asking them, like, what do you think about this? What do you think? Like, does this seem right? Would you rather do it this way? And so that's the kind of, hopefully, the kind of relationship that is inspiring them to come back to work.
That is good to know, because I think that right now so many people are worried about frontline workers and essential workers, and we want to make sure to support you guys and get food, but we also don't want people to feel like they're going to work if they are doing so unnecessarily. So knowing a lot about what your safety measures are, I think is really reassuring. And it's a good lesson for restaurateurs too, keep your menu really streamlined. You don't have to, offer everything that you used to offer in order to keep business going, which is key, I would imagine. One thing that is on a lot of people's mind, I've gotten this version of the question a few different times. Do you have any other thoughts going down the line in the works about how to increase your sales and revenue during this pandemic? You talk about the dumpling classes and kind of pivoting in that way. I know groceries weren't really meant to be a revenue driver for you, but more of a service. Do you have any other thoughts about things that might help boost revenue, especially if you are paring down your menu and offering fewer items? What are some ideas there?
Yes, we have crazy ideas. We're, our team is, they're ideas people. And so we are throwing out different things all the time, seeing what sticks. We are hoping that we will be able to eventually ramp grocery back up.
Yeah.
And, source even more products and eventually have that be more of a revenue driver. So TBD on whether that will happen. I think that, this really circles back to your last question, which is like, how much business can we do safely? And we sell out of dumplings every 2 days and have to kind of figure out, okay, who's coming in? When are they coming in? Like, do they have to take the bus? How do we get them a ride? All of that. And so I think we're still really focused on that question of like, how do we produce this food safely? And then, we feel like there's more demand than we can supply for right now. So we're hoping to just keep doing what we're doing essentially and see if we can ramp it up. But I will say like the virtual dumpling classes have been amazing. We're thinking about offering other kinds of classes. And there's so much incredible food content on the internet right now. All these talented chefs who are stuck at home. And so I think we definitely want to be part of that. And we are, I don't know, really just trying to look to our peers and see what is working well for them, see how we can support them or how we can take, borrow best practices and just try to figure out, what else can a restaurant be in this time?
Yep. And we have 5 minutes left. And so in our remaining 5 minutes, I think that this is really the biggest takeaway, right? Is how can people support restaurants right now? What can we do to support? What are ways that we can help beyond signing up for a dumpling class? What are some other things that we can do to make sure, especially those small businesses that don't have the resources, how can we help them survive?
Totally. I would say the number one thing is like, please don't put yourself at unnecessary risk. Please stay home if you can. The sooner that this passes, the sooner all of us will be able to kind of take a deep breath and try to return to whatever, normalcy.
Whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
We don't know.
I will say that if folks are buying gift cards, that is really amazing. It's great for cash flow. The challenge with gift cards is that it is a liability on the restaurant side because we don't actually recognize the revenue until you come in and spend it. So if you buy a gift card, if you buy a gift card, please wait to spend it if you can, right? Essentially, you're kind of giving us a tiny little loan and then we have to pay it back when you come in to eat. And so if you have a gift card, now is not a good time to spend it. Please, please, please. And I also think like some diners are going to have bought gift cards to places that won't be open in the future, that will close permanently. And so we all have to kind of like be okay with that, I think. In addition to that, I would say ordering takeout and delivery is definitely helpful. The places that are providing that are relying on you to actually purchase the food and come pick it up or order it delivered. What you can do also is please order beverages if there are beverages on the menu, because that is a pretty profitable source of revenue for us. And if you can bundle it all into one delivery, hopefully that feels like an upside for you as a consumer. And if you can order a couple meals worth of food, then you are either, minimizing your risk per meal or the risk that the delivery driver is taking to get the food to you. So I think 2 weeks ago, we ordered like $200 worth of Punjab Palace and we stuck a bunch of it in the freezer. And so I feel pretty great about like having all that food in my freezer. It's really grounding me right now. But in addition to that, like it's nice that that delivery driver can make one trip to our house instead of 3 trips over the course of 3 weeks.
Thank you. This was really wide-ranging. We covered so much ground. I think it was really comprehensive. I want to thank you for your time during this chaotic period when you're so busy. And again, this is Irene Lee of May Boston. So I want to tell everybody too, I believe this is going to be, this is being recorded. A few of you wrote into me asking if this is recorded. So it is. I will hopefully there's a way to share that with everybody after the fact, but there are so many great questions, didn't get to them all, but thank you all for everybody who participated. It was really great to chat, Irene. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kara.
Absolutely. Take care.